This girl took a shortcut to school to avoid being late, but unexpectedly got stuck halfway through. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get out. At that moment, she realized she had gained some weight. To make things worse, she heard footsteps approaching from behind. Annie quickly apologized and said she'd be able to squeeze through soon. Luckily, the person behind her wasn't a stranger. It was her childhood friend, George. Annie had liked him since kindergarten, but she kept her feelings to herself, too shy to break their platonic relationship. She had stayed by George's side, growing up with him until high school. In December 2 years ago, George suddenly invited Annie to go shopping. She had hoped it was a date, but instead, they went shopping for Christmas gifts for another girl. Although she was disappointed, she did enjoy the process of picking out the gifts. However, Annie later found out that George hadn't been successful. For some unknown reason, she was upset about it too. But no matter when, no matter how much time had passed, Annie's feelings for George never changed. That day, Annie was still snoozing and didn't want to get up. Her best friend, Nina, pulled the blanket off her and woke her up. However, halfway to school, she suddenly remembered she'd forgotten something. When she came back, she realized she was almost late. So, she decided to take a shortcut to school. At that point, George noticed that Annie couldn't squeeze through because of her weight. Since that was the case, George had no choice but to go around and enter through the main gate, leaving Annie to go through by herself.
Hyugo!
George smiled mischievously, saying he was just kidding. Then he told Annie to relax and lie down. But Annie suddenly worried about exposing herself, so she asked George if she was showing anything. Upon hearing this, Annie relaxed and lay down comfortably. After a long struggle, George finally managed to pull her out. However, Annie didn't want to admit she had gained weight, thinking it was just because she was wearing too many clothes. At lunch, Annie kept eating several loaves of bread. Her best friend, Nina, suggested she try the air diet. The idea was to take 2 bites of air whenever she felt like eating, imagining she had already eaten. But Annie, staring at the tempting little cake in front of her, hesitated for a moment. She decided to finish the one in her hand first. However, she was interrupted when a plate was thrown at her by Senior Lily from across the room. Despite that, Annie wasn't willing to give up the delicious little cake. Even if she fell, she was determined to protect it. Watching the two of them walk away, Annie envied their figures. She was now more determined to start exercising and lose weight. So, she decided that from tomorrow on, she would work hard to get in shape because she didn't want George to think she was overweight. Meanwhile, George finished exchanging study materials with his best friend, and they chatted about what they had watched. His friend noticed that the girl George liked seemed a lot like Annie. Just then, Annie appeared at the door and called out to George. She then gave him the leftover cake as a morning thank you gift, and seriously declared that she was going to lose weight. But George had heard this countless times since he met Annie. So Nina casually asked George if he was free this Sunday, saying she was discussing with Annie which exercise would be good for weight loss, and whether they should go ice skating together. George's friend immediately understood what was going on, and pulled George aside to agree.